So welcome to our Easter service. I love an Easter service. I remember Ernest Holmes was once asked, the founder of our philosophy, Faith and Way of Life, was asked, are we a Christian religion? And he said, well, of course. So obviously we're not a Christian religion technically, but he said, we loved Jesus. We love Jesus, and we love his teachings, and we love everything he said: love, forgiveness, compassion, kindness. So for this morning, we are also a lover of that which is revered as the Christian teachings. My name is Reverend Denise Schubert. I am the spiritual director here, and it is my pleasure to be with you here and to be with you at home. Sounded like we had a lot of kids today. Did we? There was a lot of childlike laughter in the room. So speaking of laughter, by the way, this is a very important conversation today, and in it is a kind of spiritual richness and a kind of spiritual depth that if you can catch it in consciousness, not so much the words I say, but so much the ideas, the metaphysical interpretation of the crucifixion and the resurrection and the meaning of Easter. It's just very rich. That was my way of telling you to stay awake. So Jacob and Rachel had been married for 40 years, and they decided that for their 40th anniversary, they would travel to the Holy Land. So that's what they did. They booked this wonderful vacation, and they left New York City, and they went to Jerusalem. And shortly after arriving in Jerusalem, Rachel died. She made her transition. And the mortician was talking to Jacob and said, well, you could either send her back to the United States and have her buried, or have her buried in New York City, or for about $10,000, or you can just bury her here in the Holy Land for about $500. And she would love to be buried here, I'm sure. And Jacob just wasn't sure, so he said, let me think about it for a day and talk to our families. And so he comes back to the mortician the next day, and the mortician says, well, I'm deciding to send her home. And he was baffled. He goes, why would you do that? $10,000 versus $500? And he goes, well, a really long time ago, somebody died here and they rose from the dead after 3 days, and I just cannot take that chance. That's my Easter joke. I can't help myself. So as with all other ideas and teachings and stories we tell and the stories of human history, it's really most important to make this one personal, to make them all personal. You know, it's not just something that happened 2,025 years ago to someone else. It's something that happens to us. It's something relevant to us today. So now, whether or not the story that's told in the Bible is true as the story is told is almost irrelevant for us. What's relevant is its meaning. What's relevant is the archetypal, by the way, it's not the only resurrection story. In the history of humanity, there are many resurrection stories. But this is the one that stuck with us 2,025 years ago. So much. Can you imagine I'll be lucky if people remember who I am after a week, right? But this man's life and his journey is important to us as people. Spirituality is important to us as people. And the Course in Miracles, kind of the go-to book for Jesus, really, if you want to get to know Jesus, the Course in Miracles is really your way to do it. But he says that the role of Jesus, the role of Jesus is the embodiment of one who spiritualized or actualized the divine potential. So we we follow him because he embodied what it means to know that God is. He embodied what it means to know that God and I are one, that God is real, that his reality, its reality, in science mind, we often say Mother, Father, God, so as to embrace the fullness of that idea, but that he's immanent, not only immanent, but transcendent and immanent, out there, in here, everywhere present. So Easter isn't so much a celebratory holiday as it is an instructive one, because it's really teaching us and telling us that we too can rise. We too can rise. We too can overcome the world. We too can, when we're down and out, down, what is it, down, broken, tired, broken, whatever it was. I'm missing the middle one. So in our philosophy, faith and way of life, I'm a little tethered here this morning. Otherwise, I would be dancing over here and over here. But in our philosophy, faith and way of life, we view the Bible as really the story, every man's story, every woman's story, the story from Adam the man to Jesus the Christ. This coming into the world, forgetting that we're divine, living that human existence, and then realizing or recognizing at some moment that we are more. That within us is the presence of goodness, is the presence of kindness, is the presence of love and forgiveness. Now, when we recognize this for ourselves, we go from being a man of the earth to a person of God. We step into our divinity. So our affirmation for today, and I'm not even going to say repeat after me because you all are so good at this, you're just going to go full bore into the reciting of this affirmation for yourself. Are you ready? Okay. Beautiful. So the Bible isn't just a story that happened to other people. The Bible is a story of what happens to us. Now, before the Old Testament is the journey of man, as man. And in the journey of man as man, it's the same with us, because it's our journey too, there has to be some rules and regulations. And those rules and regulations are not necessarily put forth as sin, because God, we would teach that God, sin is actually a mistake. Sin is an archery term, means missing the mark. And that there is no loving God who judges us or punishes us for our sins. However, there is a law of cause and effect. There are consequences to our actions. So we're taught in this journey, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, all the thou shalt nots, yes? And the reason is because if you kill, you will be killed. If you steal, you will be stolen from. If you lie, you will be lied to. That our suffering, our human suffering, is the result of our not being in alignment with or in harmony with the rules of life. Now we get different rules when Jesus comes, but for the Old Testament, this journey on our way through the desert, and have we all not been in the desert? Right? And 40 years the 40 symbolically doesn't mean 40 years necessarily. It means the amount of time it takes. So for them to travel across the desert took as much time as it took for them to get there. Now, it's very easy to think that that God is somehow kind of a mean, judgmental God because, I mean, after all, it rained frogs, right? The rains came and everything died except what was on the ark. Little children were killed. So it's very easy, if you take the Old Testament literally, to think that, whoa, don't want to mess with this guy, right? Don't want to mess with this idea because look what could happen. But the law was delivered by Moses, but grace and truth come from Jesus. So once Jesus enters the picture in the New Testament, all the thou shalt nots become thou shalts. If you'll look, Jesus never said, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. What Jesus said was, love one another. What Jesus said was, be kind, forgive, have compassion, know who you are, know yourself as the very essence of the divine, right here and right now, today. The knowing of that, by the way, is the healing experience. Idalia said, and part of her reading was, we often say, there's nothing to be healed, only God to be revealed. Nothing to be healed, only God to be revealed, meaning that the presence of spirit, the Christ consciousness that we can embody here and now, is the healing balm for our emotions, for our troubles, for our bodies, for our pocketbooks, for our relationships, that all of these qualities of the Spirit that we study and practice here and attempt to use as we walk our walk and talk our talk, which is love, compassion, kindness, all of those things quicken the health of the body and quicken the health of our mental activity and quicken our emotions. Now, the crucifixion is a universal experience, meaning so the definition of crucify is to treat cruelly or to torment or to criticize harshly. Now, there's also a definition that says it's to be nailed to a cross, but we're not really doing that kind of lesson here today, that kind of talk. But if you look at this definition of to treat cruelly, to torment, to criticize harshly, who among us has not been crucified? Who among us has not crucified ourselves? Who among us has not moved through life thinking, playing small, thinking we're not worthy, not good enough, judging other people and cruelly tormenting them with our words, and if not our words and actions, certainly how many people cannot walk through your mind safely? So this crucifixion is a universal experience. Every human must go through the desert. Every human is invited into the discovery of the more of who they are, which means really that the resurrection is a universal experience. So the crucifixion is a universal experience, and the resurrection is a universal possibility. Meaning that for each one of us, the possibility of rising up, the possibility of healing whatever is the source of our loss or our suffering or our battles in life is possible for everyone. Now, resurrect means obviously the act of rising from the dead, but I like the idea of rising or returning to life, waking up, the state of one who has returned to life, the act of bringing back to practice, revival, reactivation, renewal, and resuscitation. I like to call it holy resuscitation. And the resurrection was not so much about Jesus arising from the tomb, though it's just a beautiful story. But the resurrection for you and I in our everyday lives is that moment when we realize that we are more than just our ego-conditioned human self with a story, that we are infinitely and eternally connected to beauty, infinitely and eternally connected to faith and hope, and to this upward spiral of becoming that Mary Morrissey, who's an author, says. Now, as a principle, resurrection does not require our recognition in order to exist. It does exist. I remember I was not raised in a particularly religious family or spiritual family. Well, I was actually not raised in a family. I'm not sure if they had any faith-based perspective whatsoever. But I do remember at some moment, I think I was, 13 when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And I remember even then, with no orientation of I didn't, who knows what the ego is? Who knows what this Christ presence is? Nobody, 13-year-olds, unless they're in a family that teaches them such things. But I remember walking into a church that there was something holy, something available in the crucifixion of that moment. Because I don't know how it was where you were, but my parents were devastated. So this universal possibility of arising out of the human drama and trauma is available to us all. And we all have our own battles. Every one of us, we walk through life and we have had battles. We have battle scars. We have trials and tribulations. Jesus said, in the world you will have tribulation, but fear not. Because right on the other side of the tribulation is the possibility of rising up, is the possibility of laying that down and of walking into a different experience of living. So this applies to every day, not just Easter Sunday. And it applies not once, but maybe many times as we move through life, when we find ourselves in a moment of darkness, or in a moment of grief, or in a moment of sadness, or a moment of fear. I got this very interesting article, came across my desk the other day, and it had to do with I'm not going to remember who did the survey, but the survey concluded that the United States is now one of the unhappiest places on the planet. It's something like 30% of all people are unhappy. And they had lots of reasons for that, but that's not really too important. But it also said that if you were to take all the 30-year-olds in our country and make them their own country, that number would be 65%. That 65% of all young adults would call themselves unhappy. So this idea, which by the way is the crucifixion, it is the torment, it is the sadness, it's the suffering. So we should be asking ourselves, how do we create a society, how do we create an environment where that isn't the case, where not only we are happier, but so are our young people. Now, everyone also, by the way, has their own curriculum. So each person within the sound of my voice, in fact, the course would say you probably have your own individualized curriculum of waking up out of the illusion of our humanity into the reality of our divinity. And that's really hard to get because, we're here, this stuff is so real. We're like sausages. We're like encased in skin, bones and blood and tendons and muscles. And it feels so darn real that it's very hard to put our arms around the idea that we are ethereal, that there's something about us that will not die. There's something about us that is eternal. Now, do we have all the answers to that? Well, some people say they have answers. You go on YouTube in the middle of the night, like I do sometimes, and you'll find 15 people have died and come back and they'll tell you. It doesn't really mean too much for us other than information, because life's only to you what it is to you. But we each have our own path to walk and our own personal invitation into what I would call a resurrection. I have certainly had that experience for myself. In fact, I used to fight against it because, as I said, my family was not religious. So I used to have big judgment around things like born again, or big judgment around ideas like that, because it made me feel like somebody else was in charge, or somebody's making something up or something. I don't even know. But I do know now that who I was at one point was kind of caught in the suffering of what it means to be human, whether it was through relationship or through health problems or through financial problems or through, abuse, neglect, whatever it was. There was a moment when that was my reality, and I was not I would be part of that 29%. And then through my spiritual studies and teachings and readings and coming across some very good human teachers, Dr. Michael Beckwith, Eric Butterworth, Emma Curtis Hopkins, all of these transcendentalists grew to see and grew to know, not just hear, but grew to embrace that there was something unseen that was more real than that which was seen, could be seen. That the unseen is more real than that which we can see. And so when this says it does not require our recognition, it means the principle of seeing is waiting to be discovered. It's something each one of us has to discover. So A Course in Miracles said this: crucifixion was a radical teaching example meant only to show us that the effects of the crucifixion are nullified by love. So once you go from suffering to asleep to awake, not knowing you're divine to knowing you're divine, not being aware of your spiritual existence to becoming aware of your spiritual existence, all that suffering, all that past becomes unimportant, really. It fades into the background because the presence of love, the presence of what we would call, it was Jesus the Christ, but it's also Laura the Christ and John the Christ and Denise the Christ. It's like that awareness of our divinity is universal. And there have not been many people among us, right, who have walked and talked that truth. Jesus was not the only one. There have been many, the Buddha, many. I don't have to name them. So she said, Marianne Williamson said in her book, A Return to Love, she said, worship is not really, or awe is not really the right relationship to have with our elder brother Jesus. That awe should be reserved for God, but that devotion and respect and appreciation are wholly appropriate because he opened up a space for the whole world, really, for the whole world 2,025 years ago, that we are all still exploring and walking into. Now, in A Return to Love, she says, his resurrection was the overcoming by one man. Today's resurrection is the overcoming by an entire species. Now, in 1992, 35 years ago, she wrote these words in her book. The question of how to break the chain of darkness could not be more relevant than it is today. Environmental degradation, rising authoritarianism, and endless war are the stuff of our collective crucifixion. Don't get too heavy here. It is a little heavy. Meaningful. Humanity can't stop it because humanity is doing it. In 1992, she's writing this. Our own minds are weaponized against us. What is needed on the planet now is a collective resurrection, a divine intercession from a thought system beyond our own. How many of you have caught glimpses of this thought system separate from your own, this idea of divine love or divine of you as divinity? How many have had the experience of what I'm talking about? Now, if you haven't yet, or you're exploring, if you haven't yet, or you are exploring, keep coming back. That's all I got to say is just keep opening your heart, because something magnificent happens. What I do know is that spirit, I'm not very good at this, am I? Is that what happens for people, when people awaken to some story about their lives other than the sad one, is they no longer make war. They no longer kill people. They no longer kill animals. They no longer disrespect the earth or disrespect other people. That the world, the way that we're living in it now, why 65% of our young adults would consider themselves unhappy, that doesn't exist in the presence of God, or in the presence of spirit. I should say it more accurate way. It doesn't exist in the presence of the awareness of your own Christness, your own divinity, your own beauty, your own worthiness. I have a beautiful story that's practical. For those of you who know me, I want to be practical. I really do want to know, how did Jesus' life and death and arising, how does it affect me? How is it meaningful? How can I use it to be in life happier and more abundant, more healthy, more loving, with more friends, with a community? Like, how does it serve me? So in this story, she says, I was sitting around talking with my girlfriend, Barbara, and she had recently experienced a kind of emotional triple header. Her father was dying. She had broken up with her husband, her marriage of 15 years, and she was in the current chaos of a relationship with a man, a Peter Pan man, which I had to look that up. I didn't know what that meant. It means someone who's not emotionally mature. Peter Pan. Have you ever heard that term? Uh-huh. So she says, and as we discussed she goes, as we were discussing the principles of the resurrection, that's a casual conversation at Starbucks, right? Her friend Barbara remarked to her and said, well, I guess God has a plan for me and I just have to wait and see how it turns out. So, Marianne Williamson says, I pointed out to her that theoretically, since there is no time, that this has nothing to do with God's saving us for later. Very key idea here for Science of Mind, that we definitely believe that heaven and hell are states of consciousness now, not something after you die. So we're not trying to earn our way somewhere. The message of the resurrection is that the crucifixion never occurred except in our minds. Christ consciousness is not that the wounds of her father's death will heal, or that her breakup with her boyfriend will grow more comfortable over time, her husband will grow more comfortable over time, or that her affair would one day turn into a friendship. Christ consciousness is the understanding that heaven is here now. Her father will not die when he dies. The change of form in the long-term relationship means absolutely nothing because the love itself is changeless. And Peter Pan's departure means nothing because the bond that unites them is eternal. So before I go on, are you catching this? That even though these things happen, if she could view her father as a birthless, deathless, eternal being made in the image and likeness of God, she would realize that his laying on his deathbed doesn't mean he's laying on his deathbed. The body may be laid down, and most surely does, But that doesn't mean anything. She's saying that's not a crucifixion event. She continues, her sadness rests not on fact, but on fiction. It is her interpretation of events and the events themselves that keeps her heart in chains. So how many of our hearts are in chains because of our interpretation of past events? That's so practical. Yes, so practical. How many of our hearts are still tied up, no trespassing? How many of us still isolate, can't talk because of past events? That is the crucifixion. That is the suffering under the things that we say to ourselves, the interpretations we make to ourselves. Finding my place. Heaven is a transformation of these events within her mind. The physical world then follows. Heaven is a transformation within our minds. The worldly events then follow. It's funny, we're teaching a class right now, change your thinking, change your life. The resurrection is our awakening from the dream, our return to right-mindedness, and thus our deliverance from hell. The journey to the cross should be the last useless journey. Do not dwell upon it, but dismiss it as accomplished. So right now, we can lay down anything that's binding your heart, anything. We can lay it down. If we can't lay it down, we can be willing to lay it down. We can be open to a rising up within our own hearts and soul. If you can accept as your own last useless journey, you are also free to join in the rising up, in the resurrection. Until you do so, these are still her words. She goes, until you do so, your life is indeed wasted. It merely reenacts the separation, the loss of power, the futile attempts of the ego at separation, and finally, the crucifixion of the body or death. Such repetitions are endless until they are voluntarily given up. Do not make the error of clinging to the old rugged cross. So the cross is being used as an analogy here of our own cross, that we actually nail ourselves to the cross of our past. The only message of the crucifixion is that you can overcome the cross, and until then you are free to crucify yourself as often as you choose. It's just not the gospel. So, this is a quote from A Course in Miracles. And in the Course, if you've never read the Course in Miracles, the Course of Miracles is a book written from the perspective of Jesus talking. I don't want to go too much into it yet, but it's really a very deep, like a Bible, it's a beautiful book. And it says, I intended to offer you, this is not the gospel I intended to offer you. We have another journey to undertake, and it will lead you, I'm sorry, if I haven't told you, I have a little bit of a vision impairment, and so sometimes reading is hard. And it also means that if you're standing next to me, I may not see you. So don't take it personally, just kick me. Hey. I'm going to read this again. It says, this is not the gospel I intended to offer you. We have another journey to undertake, and if you will read these lessons in the Course of Miracles carefully, they will help prepare you to undertake it. And that journey is the journey of the resurrection, the journey of the becoming more of who you are, the journey of recognizing that you are whole, perfect, and complete, recognizing that you are the beloved in whom God is well pleased. You could not do it any better than you've done it. and that everything that's ever happened has been part of a curriculum to lead you to a moment of awakening, a moment of, so many words have been used to describe it, nirvana, ecstasy, peace, a peace that passes all human understanding. So as we go forth from this Easter celebration, take with you just a different way of looking at the meaning of Easter, which is also the meaning of next Saturday. So as you move through your life, through the conditions of your life, the circumstances of your life, the circumstances of the world, we are all, as the earlier quote said, this one, right? That it's now time, if we want to end the craziness, if we want to be a beneficial presence on the planet for the upliftment, healing, and revealing of the Christ mind, the mind of God in us, in all beings everywhere. 8 billion people. It's not like God is at that table but not that table. Right? God's not in that country but not that country. There are no chosen people. We are all chosen people, right? We are all individualized expressions of the Christ. So one more time. One more time. One more time. We close our service with? Today, rise into the fullness of my identity, knowing that the Spirit within is always renewing me, transforming me, and inviting me to the transcendent life of love, peace, and joy. Do you accept it? Yes. All right, let's pray. All right, so let's take this wonderful Easter Sunday, this wonderful day of recognizing the face of God in each and every person in this room. Recognizing that nothing that has ever happened to us, ever, nothing that we've ever done, nothing, mars our perfection in the eyes of the infinite. And so as we turn within to that space and dimension within us that is whole, not fragmented, not broken, not in pieces, it's whole. And though we may have missed the mark now and again through our human journey, our physical journey on this earth, this short blip in time, it in no way separates us from the one who created us. And so I know that God and I are one. I know that you and God are one. And any word will work there. You and love are one. You and the quantum field of unlimited possibilities are one. You and the Christ are one. And so it is from that place of recognizing this, of claiming it for myself, that we can I can bodaciously speak a word for and about you, for and about everybody within the sound of my voice, claiming and affirming that today is the day that something gets laid at the altar and never picked up again. Something gets released, which releases our hearts to love and be loved, releases our minds to think something new, releases our spirits to be wanderers, explorers, bodacious wanderers, enjoying this earth we live on, this beautiful, organized, intelligent, abundant earth. And so how grateful I am to stand in the shadow of our master teacher Jesus, who this day represents his demonstrating for us what's possible. And so we say yes to this possibility, to whatever degree we can say yes to this possibility on this day. And so it is with gratitude that I simply give thanks for the possibility of a resurrection, a possibility of a re-emergence, of awakening from a sleepwalking life to my own and everyone else's spiritual magnificence. And releasing these words, knowing that the universe uses our words, our thoughts, our beliefs, our actions to manifest an external world for us. So I know that the universe has already said yes to this, that the healing is already done, and we go forth from this moment happy, contented, and at peace. Truly all is well with our souls. So for this and so much more, we give thanks. Give thanks. And we do it together by saying, and so it is, amen.